This is Jimmy Scott's High and Tight, presented by a sponsor to be named later. And today we have on the other line a very special threesome. We have Douglas Gladstone, who's the author of A Bitter Cup of Coffee, How MLB and the Players Association Threw 874 Retirees a Curve. And we have two of those retirees also on the line. One is David Clyde, who was a first-round draft pick of the Texas Rangers way back in 1973, and Steve Grilli, who was a non-drafted free agent with the Detroit Tigers, chosen in 1970, and spent 3 years with the Tigers, 4 total in the major league ranks, and both David and Steve do not have major league pensions, and that's what we're talking about today. So guys, welcome to Jimmy Scott's High and Tight. Here's the next question for you guys. It's mainly, how well organized are you right now? And how well organized were you before 1997 and this and the pension deal was made with the former Negro League players?
Well, Jimmy, I'll take that and run with it, since I happen to be sitting on the committee that represents our 850-some-odd players, and that I'd have to say right now we're as organized as we have ever been. We have a pretty good grasp on how many players there are out there, where they're at, what they're doing, what their needs are. As I said, historically speaking, we're at least meeting face-to-face with these people, or have at least on one occasion. So, as a group, we're as organized and as strong as we've ever been. In years past, it's been kind of factions. There's been a lot of people like myself that have kind of been in the background a little bit. Whenever they talk to anybody at the Alumni Association, would mention it, hey, are we doing anything about pensions? And we would all hear the same story, yeah, but nobody really wants to talk about it. And so, but the problem on that, even though we are organized and we are in contact with them and letting them know what we know, we have no legal precedent to stand on, really. When it comes right down to it, not even the union legally can force anybody to even talk about this issue. We are, and Doug, you may correct me on this, we are inactive, non-vested. Is that how we're considered, I believe?
That is how you are technically classified.
And by being inactive, non-vested, they are not required in any way, shape, or form to represent us, negotiate for us, or really do anything for us. And that's kind of been the position all along that baseball has kind of taken. And then I think maybe the union has kind of put it on the back burner, whether it was ever a real issue or not, I don't know. The lawsuit, I'm sure, didn't help, but we got to get over spilt milk, fellas. And if baseball is that worried about that, then, you know, there's other things that we can be upset about.
Now, the lawsuit that was filed, was that done through one of your, you know, in quotes, factions? Doug does talk about it quite a bit in the book. Was that something that you guys both supported? And Steve mentioned, I think, earlier that it was thrown out.
The Alumni Association had no part in that lawsuit.
That's correct.
Clear about that.
So who?
And the Alumni Association really, up until just recently, hasn't, even though there's been people on the board that have talked about it, it's never really been forced to this point. It was kind of a faction, you know, just to let everybody know. Not everybody, in fact, the huge majority was really not a personal party to the suit. But by virtue of us being members of that class, whether we were actively participating in that lawsuit or not, had anything come of it, we would have benefited from it.
Right, and that's where I fit in right there. I mean, I got a letter in the mail saying I was one of 1,200 and something at the time when this lawsuit was filed, and basically I just got notes on it, and didn't do anything actively to help or wasn't asked to. But it's one of those things where you just keep your fingers crossed that something came of it. But I recently was in Cooperstown for the Hall of Fame Classic. I played in it, which is kind of funny because I mean they had Ozzie Smith, Raleigh Fingers, Goose Gossage. And because I live so close to Cooperstown, I get asked to do it. And I'm part of the Major League Players Alumni Association, so they asked me to go. And I felt like an SAT question, which does not belong in this group. There were all these Hall of Famers,
Right.
But Jim Hannon was there, who Doug had, said that he was on the forming committee for the Alumni Association and is actively, I guess, involved in this. And he locked it next to me, and I said, Jim, where's this thing going? I said, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that something comes of this. And like David, it's not like I'm going to be out on the street, which there are some guys that are literally in dire need of this. But there's guys like David and I that, we've gone on and worked for a living and done all right for ourselves. But, I don't have any pension. My pension is, what I've saved and I've started my own business. I own a restaurant, and that's where my equity is. But geez, I've had to work for that my whole life. And when I asked Jim what I was getting to, when I asked Jim Hannon about it, where it stands, he says, "Well, it's looking pretty good, but the only thing that could stand in the way now is the economy." That was the answer I got from him.
Well, see, the reason I laugh at that statement is. When we had one of our first meetings as a group, it was done in conjunction with the main board here in Houston in January of 2009. And Don Fair was asked to come down and speak to us, and he was supposed to speak about our issue. Well, he didn't, and I kind of took a little issue with that. But anyway, that's another story. But he mentioned about the economy. But it was mighty funny within weeks to several months. Let's say a 21 or 19-year-old out of Cuba gets a $20 million contract. Manny Ramirez resigns for $100 and something million. Halliday, they're crying poor man out of one side of their mouth, and yet pouring money out of the other side of their mouth. So.
Jimmy,
I don't buy the economy issue.
Yeah, well, I don't either. I don't know if you fellows have been paying attention to legislation up in Capitol Hill, but if you can believe this, and I did not confer with Steve or David about this in advance of this interview, there is a bill introduced by United States Senator Casey. Casey has gone to bat, pardon the pun, for, of all things, the Major League Baseball Players Union. Now, this is it's widely regarded as one of the top-funded pension funds in the country. And now, in this legislation, and it has a companion measure in the House of Representatives, Congressman Earl Pomeroy is a co-sponsor of it, Earl Pomeroy of North Dakota, or Patrick Tiberia of Ohio. The taxpayers of this country would be on the hook for $165 billion. It's a bailout. It's a taxpayer-subsidized bailout of a couple of unions, including the Major League Baseball Players Fund. Now, if that doesn't take all, are we now, are the people in this country supposed to, bemoan the poor players' pension fund? In the book, there was a meeting at the All-Star Game last year in which Rob Manfred, the Executive Vice President of Labor Relations for the League, met with Dan Foster, and I obtained a confidential memo that David also was copied on. Essentially, in the collective bargaining negotiations that are going to commence in spring training of next year, because the current CBA, as you probably well know, expires in December 2011, the owners are going to be asked to increase their pension contributions from $157 million to 200